Well, we are just a minute past 3 o'clock and Eastern Standard Time. And so we are going to get started and appreciate everybody joining us again today for our sixth in series of webinars. Wanted to let you know that when we have started this venture, Mary and I were thinking, we'd have 1 or 2 webinars and we would certainly end by June at the latest. And as we've gone into it, one of the things that became clear is it was really helpful from comment from Mike in the last meetings, Mike Rowland in Georgia. You said something to the effect of the conversation is as important as the answers. And as we looked at our schedules in this work, we'd like to propose that we continue through the summer, albeit with a different format perhaps, but we'll send a survey out to all of you to get some of your feedback on how and if you would like this kind of conversation to continue as we even move into the fall. To give, one of the thoughts is that we could continue to give folks like yourself a forum to chat and to talk through some of the issues that you face. Now we're looking ahead, but in a few months we'll be looking in the middle of it. And so want to look at a sustainable format that you would find helpful. So look for a survey coming out soon on what kind of format you would find helpful and in what kind of topics as we go through summer and into the fall. We definitely want to start looking at incorporating some of you in an interview format to get some of your feedback in your sort of in-depth case study knowledge on what you're experiencing out there as something that others can learn from as well. So with that disclaimer, just wanted to go ahead and get right to it. We are going to be disciplined in our initial review of this. Mary and I could talk for a long time on this stuff, but we are going to review your feedback, your concerns that you put in the chat box from the last meeting, and then go into a small group to review some scheduling considerations. For those of you new to the meeting, my name is David Sturtz with Cooperative Strategies, and Mary Filardo with the National Council on School Facilities. Hosting this series and discussion on reopening strategies and different implications that need to be considered with the intention of doing so with a diverse group of stakeholders who actually have to own the responsibility of doing this work, which are state and local educational leaders in largely in the operations side who have to make things happen given the direction they're getting from different state and federal entities. So our intent is to help provide some tools and guidance along the way that is created with your feedback and responsive to it. So today we're going to do a brief review of CDC guidance because that is something that must be contended with. There's not a whole lot of detail there, but we will at least need to reference it. Mary is going to go over the worries that you brought from the last meeting. And then we're going to look at an updated budget document. I'm asking Mary to kind of elaborate a little bit on our next steps there because we have an industry partner who's going to help us improve it. And then we want to look at modeling in school and community planning, which we have created a grid to start the conversation about the different kinds of strategies that are out there for reopening and what their implications are from education to community impact to operational impact. And we'll ask you all to look into those options. And as a small group later in this meeting, concentrate on one as a frame to build out using the different implications that we've outlined there for you. And then come back and report out and help provide some in-depth feedback on a particular pathway of the many that are going to be presented. And then of course, David, you will receive the notes. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, just to say that part of what we're wanting to do in this is to model a community engagement strategy that that
Yes.
community groups and districts and others could be doing at home. And, you know, we're testing it here. So,
Yeah.
so think about it as like, okay, this is what we're doing here, but, you know, how would I do it differently at home? And you know, about the questions, the background. So we are really trying to do something here that would help you all as you're looking at how do I engage my communities in these really complicated discussions.
And we're going to end with an offer to host and analyze survey results for you if you wanted to survey your community. We wanted to start with a very basic question that we asked you the last time, which is what concerns you about reopening in the fall? We want that same question to be asked of your community. We're going to draft some other potential ones as well, send you a survey if you wish to use it. We will go ahead and set that up, host that for you, and analyze the results, and get some armies of folks on it to make some sense of it as an offer to help kick off some of those engagements, if or sort of supplement more likely what you're already doing. Okay. So with that, we have some general assumptions for our work about public health that we have to, whatever we do has to prioritize the health and hygiene of folks, which will include social distancing, because there is most likely no horizon, no time horizon allows the vaccine to start and be to scale in the fall, particularly in early fall. And so we have to operate in that environment in some way, shape, or form. Everything from completely online, as most of us are now, all the way to back at school with increased distancing and hygiene procedures and every flavor between. That's what we're going to talk about today. Public education, we believe, is essential to the functioning of our economy and our democracy, and is something that we have to be very thoughtful. It's complicated with in terms of reopening. It's we want to look at what really are all of the options to provide the best quality instruction for the most possible students while doing so safely. And as the economy cannot fully open without schools in operation, but all of that has to be contended with public health. So this, as many of you I'm sure have seen, is the latest, greatest flowchart from the CDC. In brief, and Mary, please elaborate when I'm done, you know, this does not get very detailed, but it does not provide you a whole set of many tools, except some sort of high level questions, and really the details are to be filled in by you all. And that's what, in part, what we are looking to do in this process, since we got this, is to look at mapping back the strategies that we've talked about to these CDC guidelines, because if this is in the public sphere, continues to be in the public sphere from the CDC, this will be something that you will be asked about. How are you accounting for encouraging social distance through increased spacing, small groups, and limited mixing between groups, if feasible? You know, what does that mean? You know, if you're going to have questions about that from your stakeholders, and we want to help provide some responses there and some pathways. So don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but if you haven't downloaded this and picked it up, it's going to be something that we all have to contend with. Mary, did you want to elaborate further?
No, I think actually we anticipated much of what is in here in the work that we've been doing, and it leaves open still many of the things that we're wrestling with, which is sort of, you know, what level do you have to go to and to implement these various measures safely? So, you know, that's partly why this community engagement piece is so important, because they really have left a lot to the local responsibility and imagination.
Yeah. Okay. So Mary, once you take this, Mary did a lot of work to take, we took all of your chat messages and concerns and organize them. And Mary went through coding them, analyzing them, and here is a high-level summary, and then we're just going to she's going to blow through some of the highlights of it. So Mary?
Yeah, I mean, these will be familiar to folks. What we did last time is we're interested in kind of what was keeping people up at night. And I think one of the main messages that came across is, we're being asked to do more. At the same time, we've got major budget cuts that have already been announced. So that's a big concern. The other thing is that, obviously the virus itself, and is it going to come back around? Is it, still picking up steam? Is it losing steam? There's just a lot of uncertainty around the pandemic and how to assess the risks to staff and to students. So a very, very difficult environment in that way. There's also some conflicting advice on monitoring and how to monitor staff and health by the schools, not necessarily by the families, but by the schools. And partly that's, I was looking at the guidance from New York State, and they say the schools are absolutely not to, monitor the health of the students and identify, whether a kid is sick with COVID or not. So I think there's some conflicting messaging there on temperature taking in particular. There was concern about the inequitable impact that any of the school district choices are having on reopening, how they're affecting different communities and kids. There's was a number of folks expressed concern about, well, how do you get the public trust and confidence associated with decisions for reopening? Again, concern about a number of the measures that might be good for health, but might not be good for child development. There was someone mentioned that, if kids can't see the mouth of a teacher, it's very hard to learn to read. Because they're not able to pick up the word that they're looking at and the word that they're hearing. I thought this comment was interesting. One person said, "Well, if the adults need masks, then it must not be safe to open." And so again, if the guidance from CDC is open but with masks, I mean, does that mean it is safe or not? Right? There were concerns about teacher shortages due to high demand on the teachers, so people would just say, I'm going to retire now, I'm not going to hang in there. But also concerns that we'd be losing teachers because a number of them are in the high-risk categories for COVID. Also concerns about, the cost and complexity of sort of managing the logistics of the buildings and the transporting and staggering entrances and staggering departures and all of the social distancing, that the complexity of it was pretty overwhelming. And then also still a lack of clarity on, in general, sort of which of the mitigating measures around cleaning, around indoor air, around even social distancing have the greatest impact. So how do you know where to spend your very scarce resources without having better evidence on, what's going to help and what's not? So really, really, I thought just such an interesting set of concerns, and ones that I think are pretty widely shared across the K-12 sector on these issues. So there were, anyway, so these were some of the specific ones. David, let's just go through it quickly. These will be in the PowerPoint, so you'll be able to see. And the only thing that I sort of felt like, as we were talking about concerns, one of the things that didn't come out as a concern, but that did come across from a number of people as an opportunity, is to try to do more outside. And that's not reflected here, but it was very much a message that came across in the comments. So
right. Yeah, and so in the effort of time, we're just going to kind of go quickly through all these details. We didn't hide them or what have you, or delete them, because we wanted you to have it in the record of the meeting that you could go through in the details. But in the effort of time, we summarized them there.
Right. And this is just
one thing
we'll do a quick note on, let me just do a quick note on the bus capacity. Rob had, from Iowa, had sent some citations on really major difference between kind of the school transportation industry, the sort of standard numbers that people are used to, and the household survey. And, I think that in part it's probably some data definition issues, because it would be the difference between counting the number of kids actually in seat as opposed to the number of kids enrolled. Plus there may be other, it's 5 to 17-year-olds. It might be that they've got 4 and 18-year-olds that are in the 25 million number. So I think there's some issues there. And as I spoke to Rob about it yesterday a little bit, and was, facilities people are real familiar with data issues. But I think it is interesting. And the point is, however, that whatever the national numbers are, these are really particular to your district, and the capacity issues are going to have to be wrestled down at the actual level.
And for those of you who were not able to join our last week's conversation, we had some visual modeling there on bus capacity. We also did additional visual modeling on school capacity. Those are in previous presentations, which in the follow-up to this meeting, you'll have the links to the channel where you can download all of those presentations and see kind of the thinking there. But the bus ridership was, really ranging from anywhere from only 10 to 12% capacity in strict social distancing to, well, could we maybe do half? But some of the concerns, mentioned there is, everybody's going to have to wear a mask on a bus. Is that going to be complied with? And can you make that happen without creating some kind of draconian environment for the students where you have compliance? What about, hand sanitizers on buses? Somebody just put in the chat, those are flammable, right? If we, is that what we really want? So different concerns there. And then when it came to the school capacity, we were looking at different ways to think about capacity in terms of the square feet per student, anywhere from a maximum loading number of what we think is in the mid 40s a square foot to north of 100 square feet per student in the more extreme circumstances, with most probably right in the middle there in that sort of 60 to 80 range of square foot, but that's in previous presentations. These are some more of the chat comments that came through that Mary summarized there. Things that you mentioned, do masks count as biohazard waste? How do we account for that? That's going to be increased costs. And then who's responsible for taking for the masks, that kind of thing. There's Mary's quote, that she quoted out in New York, that schools are not expected to screen students or staff to identify COVID-19. Okay, so if that's something that's really is important, how is that going to take place? Okay, just kind of going through here. Mary, I don't know if you wanted to highlight anything else before we get to.
No, I actually think that, folks will have this and they'll be able to kind of peruse it, because I think that the exercise that we're doing, the scenarios, as you well know, as you've considered them in your own communities, are really complicated. And so I think that our best use of time is going to be in going ahead to the next one, David. Next slide.
And I'll bridge it with this one. And that is that the reopening strategy is only as effective as it is trusted. And you all have brought up that concern. We are in a mistrust environment, as everybody knows. And part of the challenge that we're contending with is even, because this is so fluid and dynamic, you have cases like what was highlighted here in Wisconsin, where the Supreme Court rescinded an order put out for the schools to stay closed. And so what kind of staying power do these orders now have? in the eyes of the public. And the one bias Mary and I have in this conversation is it's engage regularly and authentically with the stakeholders who are impacted. Is engaging with them regularly and authentically is really the path out of a mistrust scenario. And that's hard in a fluid situation like this because it's so dynamic. We don't know what's happening one day from the next necessarily. But what we hope to do is to provide in this next exercise some additional help in terms of thinking about how do we look at different schedulings if we cannot fit everybody in the school safely, and then what are some options for us? What would be our preferred option? What are some of the implications of that? And then want to, again, over at the end with the offer about surveying, Mary and I can create very basic surveys for you, host them, analyze them, so we can you can get some engagement on some of these ideas that you're thinking that you may want to pursue, some strategies you may want to pursue. Okay. So if you have been around on these webinars, you've seen this decision flow here that we've worked with, had slight tweaks in time, but essentially what we do, Mary and I come from a strategic planning background in schools operations. And so one of the first things you look at in kind of strategic planning as it relates to facilities is what's your capacity? How many kids can you safely and effectively educate at one period of time, one unit of time? And then after you have determined that capacity, then you adjust how you schedule to meet your needs. But capacity is a first cut, if you will, a first filter on how you operate. So we provided some guidance in the previous webinars with your feedback, which was very appreciated, on creating a Corona or a COVID capacity. And that is quick math, 60% of your capacity is a good way to think about it as a starting piece. But then often schools have the capacity to recapture rooms that don't typically get capacity as instructional space. And then that's when you do it at that sort of mid-range, in the range of what we think is, the 40 to 100 square feet a kid, and most of us are going to fall in the middle of that range. And once you determine if it's physically possible to serve them at each school, then it's a matter of let's engaging the community on that. Here's what we think our capacity is for the fall. Even if you think that's fluid at the moment, I think it's 60%. I think it's half. Getting some feedback on the perceptions and fear or willingness to go back to school, eagerness in that respect. And then once you have an idea about your operational capacity, then moving into time and then operationalizing your schedule and any sort of capital infrastructure needs, HR needs that come from that. And then if any of those things prove untenable, you recycle the process. Okay, now what's my capacity if the operational elements are not feasible? So with this, I'll tee it up, Mary, and then how about you elaborate, and then I'll kick us into our small group. So what we started with in this is thinking about looking what's out there right now in terms of the days at school, what's in the ether, what are people talking about? And we have everything from the top of the grid in the upper left there of 0 times a week. This is full online instruction. And the scenario here is we don't believe we can safely reopen in a way that is going to maintain an environment that we actually want to educate kids in. Because whatever we do has to be implementable, both educationally, operationally, and tenable psychologically, emotionally. Okay, so everything from that to 1 day a week. Mary mentioned that was an idea that was tossed out. I believe it was DC that tossed that idea out in thinking about that. Maybe we just 1 day a week, and I know others have done this as well. Well,
so David, David.
Go ahead.
David, let's let's see if we can sort of block the big, before we go down into the specifics of each of the headers.
Okay.
What we're essentially seeing is that depending upon the number of days at school, it will affect your education model. It affects your student support services model. It obviously is, you know, how you're using your building and your site. But you also have some ability to play with the time in school, not just how many days a week if you are in school, but how many hours of the day you are in school. So, you know, it could be that you extend the school day to 8.5 hours or 8 hours in order to compensate for the fact that you're not in so often. But then the other thing that we have seen people looking at is segmenting students. And this might be to get, you know, all of the elementary or middle school kids in school 5 days a week, you know, all day. And it means that you're serving your younger kids, but maybe your high school kids are online. So these are the major kind of things that you have to work with in your scenarios, and they each take on a character of their own and have you know, definite advantages and disadvantages associated with that. So I think with that kind of initial overview, then David, why don't you kind of go back into the specifics?
Yeah, sure, exactly. And so here's just the basic grid. It's 0 to 5 days a week. What are the different educational model assumptions accordingly? What are some of the student support services models? Building site utilization implications. You know, what are we talking about time in school? Because you know, if you're doing less days per week, can you extend the time to allow for more instruction while there? Is that tenable? Is that feasible, given all things considered in budgeting and so forth? And then what you don't see on this grid, what was available in, you know, in segmenting students. So this is talking about one of the things we mentioned in the last meeting is that, you know, part of the goal of looking at an updated, enhanced capacity and is to look at how can we, you know, safely and but effectively educate the kids so that we can continue the role of providing that high quality free public education for all. And that if, you know, we also want to look at not only reducing the capacity in terms of the number of students in a unit, the number of students and teachers in a unit, but then also looking at, can we limit exposure between groups, between packages or units of students and teachers, so that in the event one adult or child produces symptoms, the entire school doesn't have to shut down, or doesn't have to shut down for as long. Smaller segments of students and faculty would have to quarantine to limit exposures between groups. So that's what we mean by segmenting. And obviously these things have correlate benefits and challenges. Segmenting a student can go to an extreme and really high quality instruction for all students. But there may be some strategies to allow you to still maintain high quality instruction while providing health benefits. So these are just some of the basic levers. If you've ever seen a mixer board at a concert, and, you know, turning all the dials, a little of this, a little of that, just to get the sound just right for you. This is kind of there's lots of levers to pull. It's not simple. What we have provided in you see some of these are blank, and part of it is that we didn't want to fill in every little gradation of everything to provide a, you know, to clutter up the page, but we also we're going to look for some of your feedback from today's meeting to help flesh this out and provide some more depth in our subsequent meeting. So here's what we're going to.
I mean, David, wait a minute, David. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit different than that. What I would say the task is we essentially want you to select a scenario.
Right.
And in part because this is what we're all going to be having to do
Right.
in our communities, is we are going to have to pick for the opening. And it may be that we say, you know, it stays that way for 60 days or until we make a determination to do the next scenario. But we want to challenge ourselves here to select a scenario and wrestle with the impact on operations, the impact on education, the impact on community, the impact on budget. And so, you know, it's like we're going to try to take some of our own medicine, because this is actually what has to be done everywhere. And it's an uncertain and unknown kind of what's going to be like in the fall now, but it's going to be uncertain what it's going to be like, you know, later on as well. So it's not just
right,
that
Mary.
we're wanting to dig down.
Right.
We're wanting
glossed
you
over
all
it
to
too
do
quick.
that. Yeah.
And part of the rationale for this exercise coming up here too is we're going to split into small groups in a minute. Is there is going to be unlikely gradations of strategies that will need to be employed, and most likely many districts will have to employ more than one strategy at the time, given threat assessment, given regulation and guidance and so forth. So we're going to ask each of you, we're going to break you into small groups here in a minute, and ask you to pull up that spreadsheet that was emailed out. A couple of you said you didn't get it. Well, I think one of our partners here posted his email in the chat. So email him. His name is Kevin Huber if you didn't get it, and he can send you the file. And then we are going to ask you as a small group, we're going to get in groups of 5 to 6. And it's going to ask you as a group, somebody volunteer to be the scribe for the group, and then share your screen with this grid open, the one that was emailed out prior to the meeting. And you'll see there's a tab in there that is for this, that's blank, and it has 2 rows in it with all of these different columns, as well as implication spaces to fill out implications for operational impact, for educational impact, for community impact. We're really talking about logistics and cost in operations. We're talking about impact or probable impact on instruction and educational impact and community impact. We're talking about the ability increasing or decreasing for folks to return to work given the childcare function and that schools provide on top of everything else. So, and others. And so we're going to ask you to pick one of these models to, as a small group, say we want to work with this 2-day-a-week idea, A day, B day concept. We want to drill down into that and really think through, does this educational model text as listed, does that fit? Should we augment that a little bit, edit that? What are the operational, educational, community impacts as we see them for that? Come back, and then we're going to ask you to email those to us at the end, and that will help provide all of us in the next meetings one of these grids that filled out with a little bit more with more of your feedback on what are the probable implications of some of these strategies. Mary, do you have anything to add before we break up?
No, just that I noticed that Cindy Smith had a comment about the special education, and we actually have in the spreadsheet, I think it's hidden, after the education model, what is the special education model, because each of these scenarios and all of the combinations do affect the special education and special needs populations. So we think that that's absolutely something that you all should be, as you're looking at which model to do, be thinking about the implication and the pros and cons of whatever model on your vulnerable populations.
Right. So if you see in this spreadsheet right here, this is the Excel spreadsheet. You can just unhide right there. That's where we have special education considerations. It just we didn't have, and that is not our area of expertise. That is an area of expertise, and we would be, I think, foolhardy to start to fill it in without sort of expert feedback. And so we're gonna seek that. And if you have some to provide, please do. Here's the group work scheduling. If you can go in here, pick your model. There's 2 rows in case there's any overachieving groups in the mix who want to go ahead and fill out 2, but really focusing in on one type of strategy, all online, 1 day a week, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, 5 day, with some different considerations.
Well, and
here.
only to say, David, that it could be that you pick one scenario for elementary and another scenario for secondary, or I mean there's good reasons to be flexible about this. But
absolutely, you could go.
But what
online.
we want to do is we want to learn from your wrestling with this.
Yeah, and learn from each other.
Yeah.
Finally, I know we've been talking a bit, and we're going to stop, and we're going to break into small groups here. But you'll notice that there's these other tabs we haven't talked about yet. We mentioned in the last one that meeting that we were going to present draft budget summaries and details here for you. You can look at it, those tabs right now and see some of the different factors and inputs that you could insert to start to get an idea about what these costs would be. You'll notice that some of them are blank. These are costs that we are going to actually get feedback on from those in the industry. We have a partner that is going to help us get that updated and refined. So this is an evolving living document, if you will, but we will be working with this format and improving it over time, but wanted to give you sort of a picture of where it currently stands with the details if you would like to look into some of the assumptions behind the cost models. With that, I'm going to release you to the small groups. We will take about 15-20 minutes on this topic, call you back and do a quick whip around, receive your notes, and we will look to next week. So I'm going to go ahead, and if you do not wish to, or some of you have other items that you need to address right now and don't want to join the small groups, feel free. You can stick around in a large group and do something else, or if you have to go, understand that as well. But if you are able and interested to participate in the small group breakout, I am assigning breakout rooms right now and looking at groups of, we'll be in the 4 to 5 range, okay? So you'll see a message pop up that invites you to a small group room. If you could go ahead and click that link, somebody from that team volunteer to be the scribe, share your screen, and then go ahead and proceed with the exercise. If you have questions as you do it, go ahead and submit them in the chat. I will see them and can come to assist, and we will call you back in about 20 minutes. Thanks you for all of you who stuck around for the small groups. I know that's a subset of everybody who started, and I know some of the conversations able to observe were free forming. Some were diving in deep on certain on the spreadsheet. Some were diving in deep on topics that were really related to you, and that's perfectly fine. This is an open forum. It's for you, not us. And so would like to ask, just for if somebody could just chime in on what was, kind of what model were you most talking about? Can somebody, let's just say I overheard Guy, could you talk a little bit about your AA Wednesday BB day concept, and you and Julius and others were talking about? So could you kind of kick us off in that direction?
Sure. The A Day, B Day appeared to be something that, and this came out of, I think, Charleston, but an AA BB Day with a break in the middle allows for deep cleaning twice a week, once on Wednesday and once over the weekend, brings kids in for 2 consistent days, and has the real advantage that we saw of not requiring an overwhelming increase in educational staffing. You don't have to have 40% more teachers. It is not optimum from a contact standpoint for those kids who do not do online well. And there were some holdbacks, but it also addresses one of the transportation issues in that only half the kids would be on the bus on any given day. which lightens the transportation load, which I think is going to be our major hangup, quite frankly. So I saw some real benefits to the AA Wednesday break, BB day kind of an approach.
Did anybody else, thanks, did anybody else select that approach from another group and wanted to elaborate on your thinking in that concept?
So I'm Debbie, I'm with group 3 and I was the scribe. So I will send you our scribe. We took an approach very similar, but we said every other week. And we actually would have stacked our SPED and at-risk students at a higher number of days. So whether they went every week,
I see.
so we were thinking not 50% capacity, but maybe 60% capacity. So that segment of students that were SPED and the high risk, the students that simply cannot learn without face-to-face support, that they would get more time.
Mm-hmm.
In whatever model we chose, AABB, maybe they go AB, both. So we looked at a hybrid. So it obviously necessitates a hybrid model. You'd have both distance learning and the face-to-face. We'd preserve face-to-face time for labs, CTE, art, music, etc. Things that you really need the school and equipment for. We did not get into support services because we didn't have anybody that was really into that. And then, so at 60% capacity, we had an isolation room. That was a different use. Could we use some tents for outside learning to give us a little bit more space? And then
Sure.
We talked about limiting the building to outside groups. So the exposure was only for educational purposes, and time was the same. We talked a little bit about segmenting students at the elementary school level. We could keep groups together. Middle school, high school, we were exploring that really when we had to stop. But, do students have less options so that those groups can stay more pure?
Mm-hmm.
We stay with the core subjects for the year, that type of thing. Not so many electives, not so many options. So that does obviously impacts the educational model.
Sure. Got it. So you're looking at it weeks instead of days as your AB logic.
Right.
Okay.
We discussed the special ed issue, but are there legal implications of delivering a higher level of support to special ed kids than the general classroom?
So I can speak to that. You have to give them the support that's required by their IEP. So if their IEP says they need so much speech therapy and so much OT and so much PT, you're supposed to be providing that. And so sometimes that is more support than other students. Obviously, you have to modify all the lessons. So if you have a student that cannot, has vision problems and everything has to be reduced to an oral, you have to be able to modify the plans.
Right. There's always already some precedent for that level,
Right.
for that scenario. Okay. Thank you. Other groups that picked maybe a 3, 4, or 5 day schedule, you want to speak to that?
So, David, this is Mary.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So, and Jerry and Beverly and Cindy from Baltimore City had to leave, and Tim from Alaska had to leave. But so Beverly and Jerry jump in. But we spent the first part of our time talking about sort of the challenges of actually engaging the public on these issues and the in Loudoun, I think Beverly was saying that they have a lot of activity going on. In Baltimore City, they were getting ready to announce and had not done any community engagement on their plan. Philadelphia has not yet, if I've got this right, Jerry, engaged the public on the planning. And I think Cindy also shared from Baltimore that in her own community, which was not Baltimore City, but a suburb of Baltimore, that they had not engaged the public either. So that there's a sort of a, not sure how much public engagement is going on. But in terms of the scenarios, what we spent most of the time talking about was getting all of the elementary kids back into a 5-day week and having secondary online so that those spaces could be used in order to do the social distancing required for could have been maybe K7, K6, K8, however many kids you could do. But basically, the concern was that, people needed to work. They needed to be able to work reliably, and that if the older kids could manage with the online learning and try to figure out at least one day a week when they could come in so they could use their science labs, their career tech spaces, art, music, other specials. So that was the scenario that we were primarily focused on.
Okay.
Jerry and Beverly, you want to?
No, I think that's exactly right. I think that's a good summary, Mary.
Okay. Thank you. And I know we're a few minutes past the hour. We're going to go for another 10 minutes or so, and we'll wrap it up for the day. Anybody pick an online model that they wanted to focus on or want to discuss some of the pro, con, and implications of continuing with that, either in whole or in part?
Oh, well, this is Bernie. We talked about, basically this sort of becomes the ultimate catch-22 in that, probably from a safety perspective, an online presence is best. But the problem is that until schools open up to some degree of consistency, the economy can't move forward because the parents and the teachers can't go to work because the kids are home. So that's sort of like, that's part of the problem here is that, we have this catch-22 of the ultimate safety, I think, is at home, but, from the other side, you can't move the economy forward until you have some place to put the kids.
And that's as Mary brought up, and I think one of our earlier webinars, that we are in the midst of a wicked problem where, by definition, there's never, whatever solution we have is going to be imperfect, whatever strategy selected. Spot on, exactly.
Yeah.
There's no good.
Well, I mean, also the other thing is, I'm not sure the cleaning issue, especially with the younger kids, because basically, I'm sorry, but they tend to chew on everything. They share toys. They basically share books. I'm not sure that. Well, I'm not sure that just deep cleaning one day a week or twice a week is basically going to cut it for those at that level. I mean, and that sort of becomes part of the other problem is that, because the kids are going to have to, they're going to have to eat lunch probably in their classrooms. And probably, it's just going to be, it's going to stretch the school district's resources to be able to get in there and clean properly the buildings every single day.
Well, and I just wanted to lift up a comment in the chat, that Nora Card just posted from Guilford County, North Carolina. large school district, over 120 different schools, is, the reality is for larger districts, when you have variety of stuff going on, having one district-wide strategy for that impacts all kids, the same way is probably not real. And now, of course, the shudder when I say that, because the operational impacts of running different bus schedules, you already have that, right? But now this is going to be on steroids if we look at some A day, B day, some once a week, some A weeks, B weeks, some, every day part-time, some fewer days, longer time. But it's just the complications are myriad. But at the same time, the likelihood that our larger districts will be able to have one strategy that fits all seems a bit of a stretch in and of itself. I don't know, Nora, if you wanted to elaborate more on the thinking there.
Okay, so let's see.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so yes, I can elaborate a little bit more. I mean, I don't know that it would be total free for all, because I don't think that'd be affordable, but what we were talking about or thinking through is that you'd have to have almost some kind of ongoing hybrid at all times, which would certainly be a resource issue. But you're going to have, and then I don't think you could have, well, let me back up. So, for example, we have some schools in very neighborhoods with lots and lots of kids that probably are really going to need more of the face-to-face instruction. A lot of struggling students for a variety of reasons, and would probably benefit some of our most vulnerable students. Some of those happen to be located in areas where the buildings are underutilized, so that certainly helps with space and those kind of issues. But there's basically no way that we can see that you can have all the kids there all the time. So, which is why we looked at hybrid. By the same token, there may be students in that school that has students with lots and lots of needs, where a student either from an IEP or from other kinds of situations actually learns better online. And as soon as online is available to somebody else in the district, because we simply can't let their kids in full-time due to space, from an equity issue, you've got to have equitable options and choices. And then we do have, medically fragile students who, trying to figure out how you serve them at all, despite the legal IEP requirements. How do you serve them when you're doing, 2 diaper changes a day and feeding tubes?
Right.
In a pandemic. So just that full range there, as well as, Julius pointed out, the magnet schools where your learning strategy already is through art and music, and that's part of your instructional strategy. So if you take that away, you've lost a choice that parents have had, for 10, 15, 20 years in our school district. So that's where we're just thinking that it may not be total free for all, y'all do what you want, but you may have to have 3 or 4 different sort of options that are applicable to everybody if you can figure out a way to resource that. Because I'm also thinking that from just a marketing and enrollment share, and we have lots of charters in competition in North Carolina and private schools, the districts that are going to keep market share are probably of students, or in a competitive environment like the one we operate in, are going to be the ones that can meet parents where they are, the ones that prefer, nope, I'm doing online only during this pandemic because I don't trust any of this. The ones that want to do, I want regular school as much as humanly possible, and the ones who are somewhere in between.
That's an excellent point. And I just, want to pick that up, Nora, if you will. Thanks for sharing, because, and Frederick Yeager just commented charter schools in the area may also be an attractive option for parents looking for particular calendars and what's going to suit your needs. And,
Right.
Prior to all of this, we were very much thinking about, frankly, looking with the school districts, a lot of working with, how do we retain our students? How do we provide the kind of options they're looking for elsewhere, perhaps at charters and private, and how do we have that at the home district? And your comment about, not only do we need a couple of options or a handful of options, we need those handful of options for everybody that they can have some selection within is something that I think very valuable to the conversation.
This is Bernie. I'm thinking, what about if you think about this differently and treat it like most schools treat alternative education programs? Those typically have a lot more flexibility, a lot less time, the ability to do things sort of outside the normal school system. So I'm one of the things I'm going to be looking at in New Jersey is basically, what's the typical alternative education program set up, and can that be something we can use to model to allow that flexibility? Because it seems to me the whole thing we have to figure out is how can we come up with an equitable, flexible system to still deliver education to all the kids.
Right.
There's not going to be one size fits all.
Exactly.
That's a fabulous point. We already have some models for this, is what I hear you saying, in alt ed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, school districts do it all the time.
Sure.
They also run adult ed programs. They run alternative education programs. I mean, this is sort of like, if you look at it to me, I look at it now as an opportunity to basically, is this the time and place where basically the old, 1800s farming calendar, school, 1950s, everybody's in a little box and basically industrial revolution types of things, schooling finally gets, we have an opportunity to basically move beyond that and look at some alternative ways to basically deliver education. Now,
right.
I probably shouldn't say that because I'm a facilities person. So basically, in the end, that may put me out of a job. But, I had the same problem. Basically, I was trying to fit this into the normal box of getting back to regular school the way it's been for the last 150 years. And I'm not sure that's going to work right now.
Yeah, I totally agree with your point. And that was really the focus of our discussion in our small group was how do you create more of those options and find a way to pay for it and all of that kind of thing. How do you do that?
Yeah. All of these, these changes likely imply, not all, but many of them imply increased costs. And, doing so in this environment is something that, we, as mentioned in previous meetings, we're hoping to gather this work and gather these ideas as well and help share with our legislators on the Hill that what you're asking school districts to do is going to require some assistance, some funding, because states are having to cut budgets. Looking at some of the comments here as we wrap up, that there may be some. We're talking about variety and choice right now, and that we have some precedent for how to think about that in terms of alternative and adult education, which is a great addition to the conversation as well. Like let's look at the models that we already do this kind of work in and think how can we scale it, and then that variety and choice may itself be different by grade level. Some comments coming in about, hey, what might work for high school students probably won't work for 6-year-olds. and could we look at, if high schoolers, for example, some of the comments that came through was maybe if high schoolers are more digital, then have a higher digital to online to in-school presence ratio. They're a little more digital side, then maybe some of the younger kids could flex into the existing high school space if that's freed up, and those kinds of considerations, which we'll flesh together these notes and provide an update. And of course, the concept of looking at outdoor space as a way to help mitigate some of these issues.
That might work in some parts of the year, but it's not going to work in New Jersey for a good chunk of the year.
I'm with you.
And the only other comment I would make is basically, having space does not necessarily translate into having enough teachers to cover that space.
Absolutely. And everything has its operational impact, which may preclude the strategy altogether. Once you get
one other possibility would basically be, if you have teacher colleges in your state, is this an opportunity to work a deal with them to have some of those students, be thrown into the deep end of the pool here and sort of learn on the fly, and tap into them for some, way. And if you could give them college credit or something like that, then basically maybe that can save some money in the long run, that the school district doesn't have to necessarily pay out.
And that's the kind of collaborative thinking I see in the chat and some discussions. Hey, can we, CTE partnerships? What other kind of partnerships might be out there? And I just, we're running a last meeting. We ran about 90 minutes. This week we're at 90 minutes. So thanks to you all for hanging in. But we're gonna wrap on this note here, and then Mary, I'll give you the close for any thoughts as I've been yakking here.
Yeah.
But this last comment here I just want to highlight Jesse's comment about, we're talking about, kids as well. And so the social isolation, kids missing out on the socialization they need. We've got, in addition to these facility and operations, one of the reasons we want to put that community impact is this has real impact on some of our kids, and many of our kids, just emotional well-being as well. And that all is a factor. It's a wicked problem, as Mary said, and is, what's
right. And just let me close, David, let me close with this. And it's so wicked that there's no way that we will get to the right outcomes or ideas without engaging the communities, the parents of the children who we're wanting to educate in one way or another. And I know that it's hard, and I know that when you don't feel like you know the answer, that you want to know, as a school district, you want to know the answer before you go out to the community. I just really caution against, talk about losing enrollment share if you do not engage your community in this very difficult time and problem in an open and honest way. It will be very costly. And so, I just encourage folks that, to get out there with their communities, even say, we're nervous about this, but I think it's an absolutely essential part of being in a democracy, part of building the trust and confidence of the social contract that parents and communities have with their public schools. So, you can tell I can't say enough about the importance of this, and I know it's hard, but it's absolutely critical. And if you're in the community and it's not being done, the community folks can go to their districts. If you're in the district and you're not doing it, you really need to figure out how to get your team together to do it. So that's what I would close with. And thank you all for joining us again. And we'll have, I think, well, not quite the next time, but soon, close. We're going to have a website up.
Yep. With
tools and resources and information to try to consolidate some of this for states, districts, and communities to access. So we can navigate this together. Thank you.
Thank you.
David. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
check your emails. We'll send a reminder out. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.